I used to work the late shift at a mid-sized printing company in northern Colorado. It wasn't a glamorous job, just running machines, packing orders, and keeping the place from falling apart, but the pay was decent, and the night hours worked with my schedule. The company hired all kinds of people for the night crew. Most of us got along fine because we didn't talk much. Everyone was tired, everyone wanted to clock out, and everyone minded their own business. Except one guy, the new hire named Caleb. I remember the first night he showed up because he didn't introduce himself like normal people do. He just walked straight up to my workstation, stood uncomfortably close to me, and said in a low, shaking voice, "You're the one everyone talks about." I laughed awkwardly because I assumed he was joking. But he didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. He just stared like he was studying the shape of my face. I told him my name and asked what position he'd been hired for. He didn't answer. He just nodded to himself and walked away without a word. It wasn't the strangest thing I'd ever seen on a night shift, so I just brushed it off. But that was the beginning. For the first few days, I kept catching him staring at me from across the production floor. Not a quick glance. Not casual curiosity. A full, unbroken, eyes-wide stare. Every time I looked back at him, he wouldn't look away. He'd just tilt his head as if he was trying to see me from a different angle. Two of my co-workers joked about him. "New guy's weird as hell," one whispered during break. "Man looks like he wants to wear someone's skin." We laughed, but the more I watched Caleb, the more I realized they weren't exaggerating. He didn't talk to anyone. He moved through the hallways like he was gliding. His steps were too quiet. His breathing was too slow. And there was something unsettling about the way he kept his hands tucked inside his sleeves, like he didn't want anyone to see them. One night, while I was loading a machine, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate. I turned around and nearly jumped. It was him, just standing there, inches away. "You walk like a prey animal," he whispered. "Always listening, always nervous." I told him to back off, and he stepped away immediately, but the smile he gave me lingered for way too long. The next time I saw him was 2 nights later around 2 a.m. I was restocking the ink shelves in the back storage room. The hallway outside was dim because the motion sensor lights were glitching again. When I turned around to grab another box, I nearly dropped everything. Caleb was standing in the doorway. No lights had turned on. I hadn't heard footsteps. He was just suddenly there. "Dude, you scared the hell out of me," I said. He just stared at me, breathing through his nose, eyes wide and glossy. Then he said something that made my stomach twist. "You shouldn't work alone back here. It's too quiet. Things can sneak up on you." He stepped closer. I immediately backed up until I hit the metal shelving behind me. For a moment, neither of us moved. His expression didn't change, but his eyes flicked to my throat. I didn't know what to do. Scream? Push him? Run? Suddenly, voices from the production floor echoed down the hallway. Caleb turned his head sharply, almost like an animal hearing prey. Then he whispered, "You're lucky," and he walked away. A week later, I took my break out in the parking lot. I usually sat in my car with the radio on, just to clear my head. It was around 1:30 a.m. when I noticed movement in my side mirror. Someone was walking between the rows of cars. I leaned closer. It was Caleb, but he wasn't walking normally. He was moving slowly, drifting his fingers across the sides of different cars like he was searching for something. Or someone. My stomach tightened. Instinct told me he was looking for me. I locked my doors. A few seconds later, he walked right up to my window. His face slid into view, pale and expressionless under the parking lot lights. He leaned down and stared into my car. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. After what felt like an eternity, he mouthed something. Not spoke, mouth. "Why are you hiding?" He tapped one finger against my window. Not a knock, not a threat. A slow, rhythmic tap like he was trying to memorize the sound. Then he smiled and walked away. After that incident, I asked my supervisor to move me to a different shift. She said she'd consider it, but it could take weeks. In the meantime, she promised she'd talk to Caleb. She never got the chance. 2 nights later, he didn't show up for work. Nobody knew why. The supervisor assumed he quit. I assumed I'd finally get some peace. I was wrong. When my shift ended at 4 a.m., I walked outside to the cold night air. The parking lot was empty except for my car and the manager's. The building lights cast long shadows across the asphalt. I unlocked my door and got in. Before I could start the engine, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Don't drive yet. I froze. My hands started shaking. Another message popped up immediately. I'm behind you. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed not to. But I turned slowly, and through the fogged rear windshield glass, I saw a silhouette standing at the edge of the lot. Not moving, not waving, just watching. Caleb. He stepped forward into the light, and I saw his face. He looked calm, too calm. Then he raised a hand in a slow wave. I sped out of the parking lot so fast, I nearly hit a curb. The next night, security was stationed near the entrance because I reported the incident. They took it seriously. After all, Caleb had gone missing from the workplace, but someone matching his description had been seen lingering around the building. Halfway through my shift, the power flickered. The lights dimmed for a second. Everyone groaned. The place was notorious for random outages. When the hall went dark again, a few workers used their phone flashlights. I didn't, because I heard something. Footsteps. Slow, dragging steps, coming from the hallway behind me. Hello. I called out. No answer, but the steps got closer. Then I heard breathing. Deep, shaky, familiar breathing. I backed in the production floor, heart racing. Several employees were gathered near the emergency lights. Then someone from across the room yelled, "Who the hell is that?" We all turned toward the far corner. There was someone standing just outside the weak glow of the backup lights. Tall, thin, motionless, one hand tucked inside his sleeve. I didn't have to see his face to know who it was. He stepped forward into the light. It was Caleb. His eyes were huge, shining with a strange excitement. His mouth trembled like he was holding in laughter. Before anyone could react, he whispered, "You shouldn't have run." Security tackled him seconds later. He shrieked, not like a normal person, but like an animal being dragged away from its prey. He thrashed, kicked, and laughed loudly, echoing through the warehouse until they got him outside. Police took him into custody. They told us later he had been living in his car after losing his last job. He'd been following people from workplace to home for months. He had a history of violent behavior, stalking, and mental health issues. He wasn't supposed to be hired at all. The background check hadn't even finished when he was put on the schedule. As for why he targeted me, they didn't find an answer. I quit the night shift a week later. Sometimes when I'm walking to my car after closing, I still check underneath it. I still glance around parking lots. I still keep all my curtains closed. The police said he'll probably be held for a long time. But I think about the last thing he said to me every night. "You walk like a prey animal." And I can't shake the feeling that he wasn't talking about my footsteps. He was talking about how easy I was to find, and how easy I still might be. I've worked the overnight shift at a regional medical billing office for 3 years now. The building sits at the edge of an industrial park, completely lifeless after 6 p.m. The only sounds are the hum of servers and the occasional groan of the old AC system that always sounds like it's struggling. I was comfortable working nights. Fewer people, less talking, and more peace. That changed last winter when a new guy named Evan joined the shift. The first night I met him, he walked in 30 minutes early, which was already unusual. Nobody on nights arrives early unless they're desperate for overtime. Evan didn't say a word, just nodded at me and quietly took the cubicle directly behind mine. Something about the way he moved, stiff, almost too deliberate, it struck me as strange. He kept his head down most of the time, but every now and then, I'd feel eyes burning into the back of my neck. I'd turn, and he'd snap his gaze back to his monitor as if nothing happened. I brushed it off. New hires are always awkward their first week. But on his third night, he said something that made my stomach sink. I had just clocked in, took off my jacket, and sat down when I heard his voice behind me. Quiet, gravelly, like he didn't use his vocal cords enough. "You walk fast," he said. I turned. "Oh, what? You parked in the far lot, right? By the third lamppost. You walked really fast from your car. Almost like you were scared of something." My heart dropped a little. "How do you know which car is mine?" He tilted his head just slightly, like he was confused by the question. "I get here early," he said. "I watch people arrive." He smiled, but it wasn't a normal smile. It was slow, crooked, like he was using muscles he wasn't used to. Then he turned back to his monitor without explaining anything else. I told myself he was just trying to make conversation, but the way he said it, the way he watched people, felt wrong. The next few nights were quiet, but he developed this habit of mumbling to himself. Not out loud, but just loud enough that I could hear. Sometimes it sounded like he was whispering words and repeating them over and over again. I didn't want to seem rude, so I never asked. But one night, as I passed behind his cubicle on the way to the bathroom, I realized he wasn't whispering to himself. He was whispering my name, repeating it, slowly, over and over. I froze mid-step. The hallway was completely empty, the building silent except for that soft, rhythmic whisper. Yeah, that's right, yeah. I know you do. I know you do. I backed away quietly, but a loose floor tile creaked under my foot. His whispering stopped instantly. I didn't wait to hear more. I went straight home after my shift and spent half the morning trying to convince myself I had misunderstood. But then things escalated. One night around 3 a.m., I got up to grab a coffee. Our office kitchen was down a long hallway, lit by a single motion-activated light. I poured my coffee, turned around, and nearly dropped the cup. Evan was standing in the doorway, completely still. He didn't make a sound walking in. His expression was blank, eyes half open, almost like he was sleepwalking. "Oh, hey," I said, trying not to show I was startled. "Didn't hear you there." He didn't answer. He just stared. "Everything okay?" I asked. Still nothing. Then, with no change in expression, he said, "You should stop leaving your kitchen window unlocked." My blood ran cold. "What?" He blinked slowly. "I walk past your building sometimes. I notice things." "My apartment?" He nodded once. I felt like the air was being sucked out of my lungs. There was no reason for him to be anywhere near my apartment building. I lived on the opposite side of town. I took a step back. Why would you be near my place?" He shrugged. "Exercise." Then he left the room as quietly as he had appeared. I stood there gripping my coffee cup, so hard my knuckles turned white. The next day, I checked all my windows. Everything seemed normal. I convinced myself he was bluffing or trying to freak me out. But 3 nights later, everything changed. I arrived at work early, hoping to avoid him. As I walked in, the security guard stopped me. "Hey, you forgot your notebook last night," he said, handing me a small black notebook. My heart dropped. I never bring a notebook to work, and the one he gave me definitely wasn't mine. This isn't." "It was on your desk," he insisted. I opened it. Every page was filled with handwriting, messy, uneven handwriting. At first, it looked like rambling, but as I flipped further, the words became clear. It was a list of my daily routines. What time I left home, what time I arrived at work, what clothes I usually wore, who I talked to, what I ate for lunch, what time I used the bathroom, what time I stretched my legs, how often I checked my phone, line after line after line. I felt nauseous. It wasn't written by me. It was written about me. And the last page sent a chill through my bones. Friday, 1:47 a.m. He will be alone. That's when I'll talk to him again. It was Friday. I ran straight to my manager's office. She wasn't there. Hardly anyone was. It was the night shift. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? My coworker wrote down what time I pee. Before I could decide, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I turned. Evan was standing at the end of the hallway, half hidden in shadow, staring dead at me. And he was smiling. Not the crooked smile from before. This one was wide. Too wide. His eyes didn't blink. "Did you read it?" he asked softly. I didn't answer. I backed into the hallway wall. He started walking toward me. Not fast, not threateningly, just too deliberately, too calmly. "You weren't supposed to see it," he whispered. I slipped past him and ran. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. I ran through the cubicle maze, down the stairwell, and into the parking lot. I didn't stop until I was inside my car with the doors locked. He reached the parking lot door just as I pulled out. He stood there under the yellow light, watching me drive away with an unreadable expression on his face. I didn't go to work the next night. I called HR and explained that I felt unsafe. They said they'd investigate. But when I went back the following week, Evan was gone. No explanation. No details. Nothing. His cubicle was completely empty. But the thing that haunts me the most is what the security guard told me later. Something that kept me awake for nights. He said Evan had been fired because they found something in his locker. My stomach twisted. What was it? The guard hesitated. A map, he said, of the city. And he swallowed. Your building was circled, and your apartment number was written next to it. I haven't worked a night shift since. And sometimes, late at night, I still feel like someone is watching me walk from my car to my building, just like Evan did. I've never been afraid of silence. In fact, I always preferred it. That's why I like my job as a data technician in a corporate storage facility. No customers, no crowds, just me and a few people monitoring servers in a cold basement filled with blinking lights. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. That peace evaporated the month Caleb was hired. He was brought in for night shifts, same as me. At first, I was relieved. Having another person in the building meant less chance of being stuck alone when servers crashed at 3 a.m. But from the moment I met him, something about him felt off. He didn't talk. At all. Not in a shy way. Not in a socially awkward way. More like he chose not to. Our manager introduced us, and Caleb only nodded once, never making eye contact. He was tall, lanky, moved stiffly like his joints didn't fully cooperate. His eyes were always a little too wide, as if he was focusing on something far away that nobody else could see. The first week passed without incident. He typed silently, walked silently, and, this part still freaks me out, breathed silently. I'm not exaggerating. If you sat next to him, you wouldn't hear a single inhale or exhale. It was unnatural. One night, around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps in the server hallway. Slow, measured, deliberate. I checked the camera feed. It was Caleb. He wasn't doing anything, just walking slowly between the server racks, brushing his fingers along each metal frame like he was counting them. He did that for almost an hour, up and down, over and over. When he came back into the control room, I pretended not to notice. He sat down, opened a file on a screen, and typed one sentence. I like the quiet when you stop moving. My blood chilled. He didn't send it to anyone. He just typed it and stared at the words. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward me. I looked away immediately. After that night, I kept my distance. But Caleb didn't. Over the next few weeks, I began finding things on my desk when I came in. Not threatening things, just unsettling. A folded piece of paper with my login times written on it. A small silver key I didn't recognize. A torn piece of fabric that didn't belong to me. I asked my manager if Caleb had access to the offices. He has access to the entire building, she said casually. All night shift workers do. Great. One night, around 1 a.m., I went to refill my thermos in the break room. The lights in our building are motion activated. They usually turn on as soon as you step inside. Not this time. The break room stayed pitch black. I stood at the doorway, waving my arms like an idiot, trying to trigger the motion sensors. Nothing. I hesitated. Something about the darkness felt wrong. Heavy, like there was someone already in there, standing completely still. I turned on my phone flashlight and stepped inside. The first thing I saw was Caleb sitting at the table. Completely motionless. Completely silent. Hands folded. Eyes open. Staring directly at the door like he'd been waiting for me. I dropped my thermos in shock. The clang echoed off the walls. Jesus, Caleb, what are you doing? He didn't blink. Didn't twitch. Didn't speak. Just stared. I backed out of the room without taking my eyes off him. The moment I crossed the threshold, the break room lights flicked on behind me. When I looked back, the room was empty. He was gone. After that, I tried reporting him to management. They brushed it off. Night shifts are stressful, they said. Maybe you caught him on a break. But I knew what I saw, and it got worse. 2 nights later, I found a sticky note on my monitor that read, "Stop walking so loudly." My stomach sank. I hadn't spoken to Caleb in days. I hadn't even seen him, but someone had placed that note on my desk. I checked the cameras again, and that's when I saw something I still have nightmares about. On the grainy footage, around 3:21 a.m., my cubicle appeared on screen. I was in the break room at the time. The camera showed a tall figure entering quietly. Caleb. He approached my desk slowly. Then he leaned down and pressed his ear against my chair. He stayed in that position for almost 20 seconds, like he was listening for something. Then he placed the sticky note and walked away without a sound. I felt sick, but the worst was still coming. That weekend, A server alarm went off at 4 a.m. I rushed down the metal stairs into the basement to reset the system. The stairwell lights flickered, and my footsteps echoed loudly in the narrow concrete space. As I reached the bottom, I froze. Caleb was already there, standing between the server racks, facing me. In the dim, red backup lighting, his shadow stretched across the entire floor, long and distorted. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge me, didn't step aside. I swallowed hard. I need to reset the system. Silence. I stepped forward cautiously. He didn't shift. He just watched. I moved past him, trying my best not to make eye contact. My fingers trembled as I typed in the reset command. I could feel him behind me, his stillness, his breathless presence. When the system rebooted, I turned back. He was inches from my face. His eyes were wide, unblinking, filled with something I can't even describe. "You're too loud," he whispered. It was the first time I ever heard his voice. Dry, raspy, as if it hurt him to speak. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. He took a small step closer. "You make noise," he said. "I don't like noise." That was enough for me. I shoved past him and sprinted up the stairs. I didn't stop running until I reached the parking lot. The cold air hit my face as I gasped for breath, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I quit the next day, but the story doesn't end there. A week later, management called me. They said Caleb had been terminated. Not for harassment, not even for his behavior. He had been fired because security footage showed him wandering the building on nights he wasn't scheduled, breaking into rooms, sitting in the dark, standing behind people's desks, listening to them breathe. 2 nights after they fired him, the building was broken into. Only one thing was stolen. Not equipment, not cash, not computers. The chair from my cubicle. The police found the CCTV footage of the break-in. It was Caleb, carrying my chair out of the building, smiling. I changed jobs, changed my routine, changed my locks. But every now and then, late at night, when everything is perfectly still and the world is finally quiet, I feel like someone is standing in the darkness behind me, listening to me breathe,